Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show, Deborah Tavares, welcome to Windows on the World.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on today, Mark. I really appreciate it. As you know, we're here in Northern California, geographically about an hour north of San Francisco. And we're also very near to Bohemian Grove, the infamous meeting place here in the United States.
Which you went with Anthony J. Hilda.
Yes, I did. And that is up on YouTube. In fact, RT TV interviewed us there during one of our protests during the day that the Bohemians meet and have the cremation of care. And I can tell you the last 2 years, the year of 2013 and 2012, many of the protesters that were at the gates of Bohemian Grove were hit with directed energy weapons.
Which is something you've covered in quite a lot of detail. And we've also covered this on the show with Barry Trower, who you've also interviewed. And this is a very interesting aspect of your work. And you also talk about this voice-to-skull technology that they use, which is incredibly scary, but also revealed in known government documents, isn't it?
Well, that's absolutely right. In fact, what we're really working on right now is certainly getting information out to the public.
This is the Bohemian Grove. This is where some people come up to worship the Owl of Moloch. Oh, it's satanic? You're damned right it is. I mean, they take children to sacrifice them before the god of Moloch. This is Luciferian. Oh, no, it's not accidental. You know what a smart murder is, don't you? You know, well, it's where they conduct a murder and they get away with it. The people up here are getting away with it. They're getting away with murder. You are reading this thing right. You're putting it all together. You're putting all the bits and pieces together. What does the Bohemian Grove, what does this whole satanic thing have to do with understanding what these guys are doing?
They meet here secretly to devise such things as death murders or smart murders. And they are wrapping this around our necks. They're depopulating our world.
There are thousands of people throughout the globe that are being assaulted with corporate government agents, either finding out that they have directed energy weapons assaulting and torturing them, or they're being gang stalked, again with ground assault teams. We're in a new world war now, and we're not going to see the wounds of a battlefield that we typically think of a war theater, the word theater, being exploited on, where people are going to have missing limbs and visible blood. We're being hit with a silent weapons system.
Yes, which was a NASA war document, actually, which you revealed. It was on the NASA website, I believe, in 2001. And this guy, Dennis Bushnell, he's been working for NASA for 40 years. He was involved in Gemini, Apollo, Viking space shuttle. And he's was involved with this document that you've revealed. And we're going to give the link to that. But just to get back to the beginning of this, really, of where it all really starts for everybody, is how this is being implemented into their local community under a thing called Agenda 21.
Well, that's absolutely right, Mark. And I think there are many starting places back in history for people to start from. But personally, I like to start back here in the United States. Certainly, we know that when the Federal Reserve was initiated in 1913, the United States lost its sovereignty because we became a corporation. The United States is USA Inc. In fact, the United States Incorporated is listed on Dun and Bradstreet, and people can check that out for themselves.
That's absolutely right, Deborah, because many people in the States will hate to hear this, but it is believed that there is documentation in the City of London that indeed the United States of America is a plantation of the City of London.
That's correct. And people can type in for themselves and understand that on Dun and Bradstreet, and that's DUN and Bradstreet, one word, BRAD, and then street.com. You can type in many countries, certainly the United States, all of our city councils, our county board of supervisors, our school boards, the EPA, the Fish and Game, the U.S. Forestry, the FCC. They're all incorporated. They're doing business, and they are creating business for the mother corporation here in the United States, called USA Inc. And I think it's easy for people to understand. People are scratching their heads here in our country, wondering how is it that the presidents can continue with executive orders coming out of the executive branch, executive orders that don't represent the people, that people have never voted for, and they're horrific. We have the National Defense Authorization Act. We have many, many executive orders where, in fact, they can literally move you off your land, take your property, and relocate you all at your own expense. And we're going to see more and more of all of this kind of thing happening. But to just build a foundation of what has happened, first of all, most of us were certainly brainwashed during our educational system that was programming so that we could and would remain in a matrix, in all believing that we had a representative government. And we realize more and more now that something's really wrong, that we can vote people in office and there's no change. People are becoming frustrated with that. And I think it requires the next question, what's going on? And that has been a question that sadly has not been asked by enough people. But the next question becomes very simple. You find documentation where you realize that the United States, as a government, as a representative government, is in idea only. It doesn't exist in reality. And in fact, there is a very important document here in the United States that everyone can confirm. And I think this is exceedingly important for the globe to understand what the United States is and what it has become. And it is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9th of 1933. Again, the United States was dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9th, 1933.
Well, this is very interesting. As we operate in bankruptcy with a fiat currency system, we have no rights as we are paupers, which goes back to this law system that people operate in and fail to understand. And that's why this sort of tyranny can actually happen.
Well, that's exactly right. Sadly, we have been enslaved by lack of knowledge, and all the documents have been there. We have been distracted by the covert collapse of an up and down structured bubbles in the market, in real estate, and the economy. All of this has been created. A very important document, and I need to add this at this point, Mark. Stopthecrime.net, that's www.stopthecrime.net, is our main website. We do host several other websites. Smartmetersmurder.com, that is smartmetersmurder.com, and toxicsky.org. Now you can link to our other websites from what we consider our main site, which again is www.stopthecrime.net. Now all the documents, Mark, that I will be referring to during the program are free downloads from our website. And for anyone that, for whatever reason, is unable to download our documents for free, we do have a printing shop here in the United States that, for the cost of printing and shipping, will download documents and mail them out. And I want to give everyone the phone number because we want everyone to be able to get these documents while we still have an internet, while we can still download documents at this point. We don't know how long, of course, the controls will bear down on us, and we won't have the flexibility that we currently now have, because we know that more and more we're being entrapped and enslaved and surveilled and monitored and harvested and hunted. So having said that, the phone number to call is area code 707-586-9558. Once again, area code 707-586-9558. Now this phone number is in the United States. It is in Northern California. That will give you an idea of where you're calling. But you can just request the documents if you're unable to download for free. What I really want to point out is that as a result of the bankruptcy, it's important for everyone to understand that the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund were the receivers of the United States bankruptcy, and of course the international bankers. And what's important is all the United States offices, officials, and departments are and have been operating within a de facto status in name only under the emergency war powers. And what is important to understand is that our government then became what they call a democracy. People don't understand that a democracy is an established socialist communist order. We were once a republic for a brief time. And people are confused. They keep saying it's a democracy. Well, yes, it is a socialist communist order that we have been in. And this is why, again, as we spoke a few moments ago, Mark, that the United States is literally functioning through the executive branch of the White House via executive orders. And the American people were not taught this. They're unaware of how the government functions. Sadly, most people still believe that we have a representative government. And I think it should be fairly obvious that when we have to read labels, when we purchase our food, to try to select food that has fewer poisons and toxins, such as aspartame and high fructose corn syrup and many dyes and other chemicals. And then we certainly are opposing fluoride and the different chlorine in our water supply. We're being flown over daily here in the United States by the chemtrails, and we know that they're dumping an array of toxins and chemicals. They're poisoning our soil and our groundwater, and they're poisoning us, and they're dropping microdust on us, nanotechnology. This is not a representative government. And Mark, what we did Are you still able to hear me?
Yes, you're coming through very clearly. We're going to take a short break in about a minute, and then we're going to get into how we are positioned in this system and what we can do about it. But just to round up, Deborah, what would you like to say before we go to the break?
Right, great. What is important for everyone to understand is our governments are incorporated. They are corporations, and the United States is a corporation, and they're earning profits. Everything is their corporate charters are void of recognizing life, any forms of life, and sadly, that is the illusion of that has been created for people. They believe we have freedom, justice, and liberty. That is all an illusion.
And it's that illusion is becoming more transparent now as people see that their rights are completely eroded, and there is only a consensus which is being implemented by an agenda-led corporate government. We're going to take a short break, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Murder.
Yes.
And the people don't know what it's about.
Yes, in fact, even PG&E, who is deploying these meters on the people here in Northern California, have a care program. Not that I think that it is related to the care program here in Bohemian Grove, but they're putting on meters. They don't care about the health, welfare of the people. They don't care about the fact that military documents reveal that the smart meters were devised intentionally to cause harm. The ringing of the ears, the sweats, the heart palpitations, the inability for people to think clearly and to articulate, the possible brain damage that this causes. It is all designed intentionally to cause harm for people. And my grandchildren are living amongst death to the greatest degree that I could never have imagined in my lifetime. With these death dumps that fly overhead, that these evildoers cause the rest of the world to put up with. The whole world is being surrounded with the tentacles of the smart meters on all the homes. The overhead aerial sprayings are occurring worldwide. People are getting sick everywhere. And people have to stop taking what these few hundred people are dishing out to us. We have to finally say, no, we're not going to allow you to make us sick. We refuse to die a slow death. We refuse to listen to the Ted Turners of the world openly at vineyards talking about cannibalism because there's going to be food shortages and water shortages. We refuse to be told that this is going to be our end. We are not going to sign up for the program that they seem to have felt that they are designing for us. They are not going to do this to us. We are not going to allow it. They cannot have their little meetings up here and create schemes in which to entangle all of our lives. We live in unbelievable times. It's unimaginable for the regular person on the street to even perceive what is coming out of this Bohemian Grove.
Welcome to Windows on the World with me, Mark Windows. Reports of your death were greatly exaggerated then.
As soon as I was going out the door, she says, "All right, Johnny Delirious, you go outside that door, you're a dead man."
Change from Richard and Judy for you.
I've come home.
Workfare isn't a job, Ian. Okay, if you're listening, workfare isn't a job, it's slavery. Deborah Tavares, welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about how we're positioned in this system now. We've talked about the belief system that people have that we live in some kind of democratic system is actually now completely eroded. We are working and enslaved by corporations, and corporations are dictating our reality. So let's just talk about what we are and how we find ourselves in the system. What are we to the system?
Well, absolutely. In fact, I will refer everyone to a YouTube that we did. It's up on YouTube. We did an emergency town hall meeting here in Northern California to illustrate and demonstrate just what you asked right now. And of course, I will add dialogue to your response. But I would highly recommend everyone go to YouTube and type in "Who is Running America?" and the CAP, CAP. I think you can just pull it up by "Who is Running America." That will demonstrate what and how the local corporate structure is operating in your city right now. And what we must do is we can no longer tolerate government corporations because they don't work for us.
Jennifer and Rocky are with the City of Santa Rosa. Jennifer is the Deputy Director of Water Engineering Resources for the city. She oversees the city's water conservation program, asset management program, environmental projects program, and water resources planning. Rocky is the Senior Water Resources Planner for the city and has previously worked as a Senior Civil Engineer for the town of Windsor.
And the YouTube, again, "Who is Running America?" is so important because during that discussion, we're talking about the climate action plans. And everyone that's listening right now, wherever you are, globally, there is fraudulent science creating corporate policies to subdue everybody in your home, in your business building, globally.
That's
And
very interesting, Deborah, because I've been looking at what's happening locally here, which is obviously the same as what you're coming across and what you did come across when you started looking into Agenda 21. It's actually ramped up here quite a lot now. They're starting to build these high density flats with what they call overlook and constant surveillance. Now, the overlook is the interference by the local council and the police. And we're covering a case on this. I think it's going to be on the show that this interview goes out on. It's truly shocking of how they're targeting citizens. Now, what they're doing is they're bringing in what's called community interest groups under their organizations. They're called community interest groups and community interest companies. And they're sponsoring what they call social entrepreneurs. Now, these people aren't real social entrepreneurs. They are people who have been chosen.
yes, that's absolutely correct, Mark. In fact, I can say to you that we're having the same situation here in the United States. What we're seeing here in our local cities is that they are hiring consultants that are coming in and they are manipulating the meetings. They claim that they're facilitators, trained facilitators, and they are.
Exactly. Deborah, you just
said,
brought up something very fascinating here, because we exposed this with what was known as the Occupy movement at St. Paul's in the City of London. Now, what was very interesting about that was that the original Occupy movement was taken down within weeks by trained facilitators. And this is exactly what they're using to bring in Agenda 21. And the Agenda 21 strategy was brought in and enforced on the Occupy movement very, very quickly. Now, these facilitators are trained change agents, and they're actually trained in the private sector as well as the public sector. So there's these corporations that train facilitators or change agents, and you can look them up, and a lot of these companies are quite open about these people that they put out there. So what you'll find is that in your local community, all of a sudden, a new organisation springs up. And it's a community organisation, but you've never seen these people before. That's pretty much what we're talking about here, isn't it? We're talking about people who they use a thing called the Delphi technique, which was invented by the Rand Corporation to gain consensus. So in other words, if I say, I'm your facilitator today, and we're going to talk about who wants Coke and who wants Pepsi, and someone says, I don't like soft drinks, I say, well, that's not on the agenda for today, but just for the sake of the group and the people here today, would you like Coke or Pepsi? That's the way a facilitator works, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly right. In fact, we filmed a recent facilitated meeting about water here in Northern California. That is up on our website under our YouTube channel, and it's called Water Wars. I think if people take the time to watch part of that meeting, they will understand what a facilitated meeting looks like. This is, again, as you said, the Delphi technique, and that's spelled DELPHI. And everyone needs to understand that this is a brainwashing technique to bring people that believe they're there to commit to public input, to bring them into a consensus. Anytime you hear the word consensus, it is an operative for controlled outcome. And again, on stopthecrime.net, on the home page, you'll find our YouTube channel. And we filmed an unbelievable Delphi about water. And these programs are set up on behalf of the corporate structure. In order to be successful with ramrodding corporate statutes over every single one of us, they handle the meetings. How brilliant is that?
Well, it's absolutely correct, Deborah, because I've seen this in action, and the Delphi can be interrupted and defeated. And we did a whole show on this, and it was called Infiltration Special on the People's Voice when I was there. And we had people who I've worked with in the past before and who've all experienced this. It goes on in all walks of life. And really, the Delphi can be defeated. But at these public meetings, they often have co-facilitators, or as they called them in Occupy, dragons. So as soon as you start saying something that's not on the agenda for that consensus and that facilitator-led meeting, you are shouted down. Or they use more subtle techniques. If it gets to a stage where it looks like you may be getting the upper hand, they actually send a group of people around you to shout in your face. This is what happened to us.
Well, Mark, sadly, I have to say this about my experience here in Northern California with regionalizing roughly 109 cities into one region, a mega region called One Bay Area. We attended many meetings for several years with the original thinking that we could gain the upper hand, we could take over the process, and we could drive another outcome. That is not the case. What is the reality is that by the time they get to the illusion of public input, those policies have already been funded by grants and contracts have already been signed. It's only a required process to make it appear that the public has gone along. This is all part of what I discovered when I was researching deeper information about the smart meter and the global smart grid. What I discovered, Mark, was even IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers. I was watching YouTube videos as they were coming out of meetings in Europe in various locations. And they were being told that the reason that smart meters needed to be deployed and rolled out was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And many of these scientists and engineers were coming out of these meetings and were giving these 10-minute little discussions. And they were all saying they didn't understand what was going on, because who determined that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? They were all saying that hasn't been determined. And yet the meetings were rolling forward anyway. And those scientists in Europe, this was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, were saying that they didn't understand how the United States politicians could go forward with a rollout of the deployment of smart meters because of the fragile economy. We have been, and we're in a very deep and very serious recession. And they also were alarmed that none of the legislators were telling the American people about the new infrastructure that they were getting ready to deploy on all of us. This was all very stealth. In fact, just as a side note, right now, Pacific Gas and Electric, also known as PG&E, it is the utility provider here for electricity and gas in Northern California. PG&E on the board has Rothschild. You can type in PG&E and Rothschild. The Queen controls PG&E. PG&E was set up in the United States to be the model utility company for all of the other utility companies in the United States to follow. In fact, PG&E was present at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and was also one of in the top 25 contributors monetarily towards this as well. So what I'm saying is that the corporate structure has had these plans, and it is a requirement of the corporate charter to create the continued illusion, to keep the dissidents held down with the illusion of public input. The decisions have already been made. As a corporate structure globally, everything runs on contracts and grants. And this is what people need to understand. And in fact, Mark, we found a number of grants and contracts that have been signed here in Northern California, bringing in requirements for all of us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in our homes. And you're facing this here in the UK. We're here in Northern California with the requirement to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 25% below 1990 levels by the end of 2015. So we have the most aggressive requirements of any plan I have seen globally thus far.
I was discussing this the other day about why California has been particularly targeted with this draconian Agenda 21 rollout, and it seems to be that California was obviously a very, very productive state, and of course they really need to take away sovereignty. They're doing it here. I don't think it's quite as aggressive as what you're saying. They're not going for the houses yet, but that's going to be coming pretty close. For instance, what they're doing, there's now a plan to basically build 4 new entrances on a piece of public wasteland, which is marshland, really. But then when you look at why they're doing this and why they say we're going to build some new entrances, well, there's no entrances there, right? It's open public land, so that means they're closing it off. But they're asking for an 80% carbon reduction on that land, which means obviously that we're not going to be allowed on it. So everything's done very stealthily, and it's all it's all double speak and it's all mirror speak. What they're saying.
Well,
So
that's absolutely right. In fact, Mark, there's an excellent book by William Lutz, Lutz, on doublespeak. And it's important for all of us to get a handle on what you just said right now. That's exceedingly important. We're being taken down by the Delphi technique through the Rand Corporation, manipulating and facilitating all meetings. It doesn't matter what level of meetings. They're world climate change meetings. They're all conducted by the Delphi technique. Even your local school board meetings, every meeting. And then doublespeak, because as certainly you know, there are many military documents that talk about non-lethal weapons. But right after you read that, it says that the pulsed microwave frequencies can be used to cause heart attacks. Well, non-lethal is anything but non-lethal. We're literally being subdued by a new language and a new manipulative process. And I believe that is easily done because, sadly, most people don't believe that there could be anything as evil as what we are experiencing now. There's many good and decent people that just don't think in the terms of the evil that is in our midst. In fact, there's a very important quote that J. Edgar Hoover made, and I'll read that here in a moment. But it is most important to understand that this is all in the light. We just haven't understood the system and we haven't looked at the documents. They're really not hiding anything. What they have done is they've created a lack of knowledge by what we have not been taught in school. And we don't know to look at the documents. In fact, in the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document that we have on stopthecrime.net, they tell us that this is how they cull the herd. And an example given in that document is referencing food. They'll give us food that we want, but it's not food that we need for our brains. And they say that you have a choice, and that if people make the choice that is not good for their health, well, then they deserve the consequences. So what we're seeing now as well is people are being subdued not only by the Delphi technique, by doublespeak, they're being hit with all kinds of silent weapon systems, such as toxins in our water supply, toxins in our food supply, the delivery system of vaccines and vaccinations, as well as the indoctrination in education, and the poisons in the air. So we are, and all of the increased frequencies that we're being pulsed and microwaved by every day. The assault upon all of us is full spectrum dominance. In the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document, we are told that the controllers, however you want to refer to them, want to control all energy on the planet. And we are energy, our brains, our bodies, animals, all living things, everything is energy. And at this point in time, Mark, we are in an extremely perilous time, very dangerous, and extremely predatory. We're literally being hunted, tracked, monitored, and harvested.
yes, and by very deviant, subversive, and evil people, as anyone who watches this show, Windows on the World, will now know, because we've covered just about everything you've just said in the last 30 seconds, Deborah. That's brilliant. We're going to take a short break, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
The Nutter is at Wembley Arena, and I tell you this, control system, you ain't seen nothing yet.
The fascist global state is not coming because we're not having it anymore. No way! No more fear. We are all one. people are waking up. The beginning is here. Awaken.
Y'all planted drugs on Yolanda, and we're gonna get her released and get the crooked cops busted.
That gave all the officers time for their adrenaline to slow down so we wouldn't get shot.
Just for the viewers out there who may not know about this story, when did you discover this pyramid?
In April of 2005, I first came to little Bosnian town of Visoko.
Yes, thank you. I've attended a number of these meetings. I'm really concerned because Sonoma County has about 495,000 people, and I'm not seeing much of a representation when it comes to potential water theft and monitoring, and a lot of confusing conversation around the word voluntary and monitoring. I don't think those two fit very well together. And I wanted to ask a question of Marcus, and I had a couple of other questions because this is a public dialogue opportunity. And I had the question.
So other people can speak. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so let me continue, please. At the last meeting, Marcus, I want to make sure I got this right, because I did listen to the recording that we took, and this is what I got. But I want to say this and make sure. You told us that the groundwater irrigation estimates from the USGS model showed that rural residential and rural agriculture are using a combined 84% of the total groundwater use, and that of the 84%, 44% is rural residential. Over 50% of the groundwater use is being decided that it's rural residential well pumping. That's what you said verbatim in the tape that I took off. Now, why I'm concerned about too few people being here is this is water. And I can tell you that when you tell me that since the water agencies and stakeholders have clearly established global climate change as a real and significant threat to our water supply, please identify when weather changes were not a threat. And I'd like to see your reports on that. Because all of a sudden, I'm hearing Susan Gorin talk about her visit to Sacramento yesterday, telling us that if we don't manage, monitor, restrict, regulate, and control groundwater pumping, then the state is going to come in and sue us. So what does that mean to the threat of people with groundwater wells that are going to then be required to have reduction? In fact, I was just looking at what's happening in Montana. I will, but I have one more thing to say. Montana right now is informing the nation that their water is being taken and their usage of their land is being redefined. Cattle and ranchers are going out of business, and pursuant to that, you're handing in the back this grazing book. It's saying that we need to change our diets to reduce the water consumption on farms and ranches and not eat meat. So I'm really confused with this doublespeak. It's really a concern. To me, this sounds like water control and water theft and rationing.
Can you clarify, Marcus, the issue that was brought up about what was said about rural and ag use, the numbers that were brought up, and then also perhaps a policy background as you guys understand it to address the policy issues that this woman has brought up and is concerned about? Tim, you might be able to help with that policy background as well, but maybe the first question relative to clarification of are those numbers accurate that you're asking about?
And there's not enough people here. I want to know how you put out the information to get the people that are going to be threatened with reduced water supply.
I mentioned a number of groups at the beginning that helped us spread the word. We did a press release. We had our panel members spreading the word, where there were a variety of ways that we tried to put the word out.
Yeah, the USGS estimates are that the majority of groundwater pumping from the plan area is rural residential, followed by agricultural irrigation. And that is an important stakeholder group that we've really worked hard to try and bring to our meetings and reach out to through meetings like this and other avenues. We've, in addition to reaching out through local organizations to get the information out to rural well owners, many of the other panel members are also well owners, and so they bring that perspective to the table as well.
Now wait, when you mean they bring that perspective, you mean as a rural landowner, they're bringing the perspective of the total amount of usage? I'm confused with what you just said. I'm hearing so much doublespeak. It's hard to cut through what you're saying, because I'm really concerned about what I'm really hearing here.
What is the question?
The question was, Marcus just said that on the panel, there are private well owners that bring the information to the panel discussion.
Could I?
Who's monitoring?
Comment?
Who brought those? Who brought the figures that rural residential wells exceed agricultural well pumping? Where did that come from?
Can I answer that?
And I want you to. Thank you.
Okay, so
hold on one second. Let me interrupt. I'd like you to answer that, and then if you could give maybe very briefly, based on your understanding of state policy, Tim, the issue, the concern about state coming in with management, and then I would like to move to the other people that have been patiently waiting in the queue. So let's try to answer those.
Okay.
Now, I want to respect that there's other people waiting.
First of all, there is no metering of domestic wells and agricultural wells. It's all estimated. So when we say the estimates of domestic and agricultural well pumping, it's exactly that. It's based on census, and it's based on rough calculations of a percentage of use and some number that has been estimated by the USGS, so it's an estimate. There is no other way to estimate the well usage without metering.
So look, I'm sorry, it's Deborah, is that right? Look, Deborah, there's other people that are waiting. I'm going to encourage you. No, thank you for your questions. I want to respectfully appreciate that. But there's other people that are waiting. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. There's other people that are waiting. We're going to break out from this plenary session a little bit. I encourage you to come talk to all of us with more of your questions. But I'm going to go to other people because they're waiting. So.
And this is not the way to conduct a public discussion. So go ahead with other questions. And if there's time for a second question, I would like to please have that opportunity.
We'll see what we can do. Okay? I'm appreciating your questions. There's no manipulation here. I just want to include as many people as possible in this discussion, okay? So I believe you were waiting, and then ma'am, you were next back here. Do I see some other hands? I thought I saw over here, and then Lloyd in the back. We're about 13 till. Let's just keep going, and let's just try to be.
There's 495,000 people in Sonoma County. And I would bet you, which you did not ask, how many people are actual residents with wells. I'll bet you out of this 50 people that were here tonight, maybe there were 10 people that were here with actual wells. And so what I find is the lack of due diligence to make certain that this is being articulated to the population. So why? It's the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique was dreamt up by the RAND Corporation.
Were you asking me a question? Before you get into that, was there a question?
I asked you the question. Are you aware of these other plans that are requiring water?
We are, yes, and that's something that's being folded into our groundwater management plan. We recognize the interaction between water use and energy use, and there's definitely a benefit in reducing groundwater use. You're also reducing your energy use.
So now the plan is fully behind the idea of climate change. Is that correct? Because I've heard you say that in the past meetings.
Well, in order to plan for our future water resources, we think it's important to utilize the best available science on how our climate may be changing in the future, so that we can begin to prepare for those situations and more responsibly manage our water resources. And so you're looking at the climate change model
that is being fomented by consensus by the Delphi technique. Is that right?
We're utilizing a number of different climate change models because we recognize that there's not one individual model that's likely to be correct. In fact, none of them will likely be correct. They're all models, so there's going to be some variation on
well, while they're models,
the
that
future
is true.
predictions.
But these models are coming into plans and policies that are being put into place. It is called the New Green Economy, okay? And it is horrifically detrimental to people that don't understand what is being perpetrated. And so I'm really frustrated when I come to a meeting like this. It's a Delphi meeting set up with a trained facilitator that manipulates the discussion and cuts us off. I mean, I've been to a number of these meetings. There's a half an hour at the end for the quote-unquote idea that you want public input. When you shut people down, you don't want to hear what they have to say, and you act disinterested when I'm trying to talk to you. So I'm just very frustrated because I know what's going on. I've done my homework. I know that the company that has been engaged to put forth this plan is making the $279,800 due and payable in full by 2015. Am I getting that right?
I don't know what plan
It's
you're
the company. It's the company that is involved in working with the city. It's the signed contract with the company out of Sacramento. So much for outsourcing.
The city of Santa Rosa?
No, the SCWA project manager. You're involved with the
He's the
plan.
project manager of this collaboration. Yeah. Do you guys ever ask people if they want to be videotaped, or do you just videotape people?
Oh, well.
I mean, I'm just curious.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
we're in a public place.
It is, yeah, it's an open meeting. Yeah,
Everybody's wondering why it's not videotaped.
Oh, thank you.
So, and we are.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
The surveillance is
I
insane.
mean, I was just curious. I was just curious.
Well, so now you know.
Yeah.
So,
That's fine. It
you'll
is a
see
public
yourself on YouTube, so we'll
Yeah.
get it out. We'll let everyone know what California water theft looks like. And what a Delphi meeting looks like. And
It's
we'll
so
be able
funny that you keep using the Delphi, It's
Yeah.
like, that's odd to me because I actually really enjoy my job. Hi, I'll say hi to everybody. And helping people get involved in this kind of planning. So,
Okay.
that's
Well,
up to you
I
if you want to think I'm a manipulator or something like that. That's up to you.
You're a
but
facilitator.
I really enjoy my job, actually.
Well, I'm
and I think it's great that there were a lot of tough questions asked tonight. That's good. It helps the process.
Well, it's a
Not to this extent.
process that has a predetermined outcome. And that's
And what's that predetermined outcome
the
tonight?
fact that I was hearing two men speak that are on the advisory panel, saying that this is a cookie cutter, this plan, and the panel has absolutely no teeth.
Come to
and
a
this
pa- you
is
should come to a
all,
panel meeting.
hang on,
You should come
and
to a
this
panel
is all
meeting.
coming from the state. And I know that it is. I've done my research. And so I get frustrated coming to these meetings that present themselves as welcoming public input when it doesn't.
You should come to a panel meeting.
And I'm
I
planning
invite you to. Yeah, you should come.
I
You'll see a panel meeting. You'll see what it's like. I mean, I'm not going to tell you anything else about it because you seem to be set on how your view of it. But you should come.
Rue has explained that tonight's meeting was very similar to a panel meeting.
A lot of similar issues came up. Yeah, I mean, the panel has worked through a lot of these issues. It's been like a 2-year process, monthly meetings. It's been a long process.
Yeah, and we're kind of getting in at the tail end when the draft is all put together and they're the final decision makers, but really it's the state. And it's just all doublespeak. I don't know if you've ever read that book on doublespeak.
This is actually a local groundwater management plan.
It's not a local groundwater.
Okay.
It's for the local region, but it's. I happen to know that the state engaged NASA, NOAA, and the Scripps Institute. And for the subsidence issue, NASA has been engaged to address that statewide. So that was an answer to Marcus.
Come to a panel meeting. I think you guys should come.
Deborah Tavares, welcome back to Windows on the World. We're having a fantastic discussion here about what's affecting both us and you. We're over here, obviously in the UK, and you're in California, and we're talking about a worldwide global tyranny called Agenda 21, which no one seems to have heard of, yet is being implemented in every part of their daily lives. And it covers every aspect of life and every asset on the planet, which is us. We are assets. We are chattel goods of the system. So in other words, we are their property, and they are now at the position where they are making us their property as they have never done before. But previously it was with a duty of care. Now it's a global depopulation program. And we're going to talk about a document that you found. So can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, I will, but I wanted to underscore the word Agenda 21, because again, when we think of doublespeak, we have to analyze our words and what policies we're referring to. And I think it's most important to understand that what we're really talking about are corporate policies that all of our cities that do not represent us because they're implementing policies that we're not agreeing to. This is UN Agenda 21. They're local policies being adopted in your cities globally, everywhere, right now. And they're being implemented. Your local city governments are signing contracts and they're accepting grant money. Grants are bribes. And when your local city signs and accepts grant money, there are strings attached. The grants are attached to agendas. In other words, the city can only fill out a grant application and request these funds if they're agreeing to implement the monies as allocated to them. So because cities are really broke, they want to get as much free money, they believe it's free money, and implement all of these wonderful things like bike lanes, like turnarounds or roundabouts that they're deploying here in the United States. Grant money is not free, and you're being obligated through these policies to repay by having your local taxes increased. What is most important is to understand the real mechanisms here. It is very, very important. It's a corporate structure. It runs on bookkeeping. We have got to become familiar with what the bookkeeping looks like. And you need to go down to your city and ask for the grants and the signed contracts that's obligating you to all of this money that the city is going to have to pay back. What will be happening is every city will start going bankrupt like a house of cards, like what we saw with Detroit here in the United States. And I just wanted to really point out again the idea of doublespeak and the idea that it is not an elusive Agenda 21. These are local policies occurring right now that you did not vote for, that your illusion that you have a representation with your city councils and they're looking out for your best interest, they are not. They are implementing these policies. Prior to this, Mark, I wanted to, you had referred to the Aquarius operations briefing that we do have posted on the homepage of stopthecrime.net. Again, www.stopthecrime.net. The Aquarius operations briefing was given to us by a whistleblower. And what is so important to understand about these micro cities that they're building to literally colonize us, surveil us, assault us with frequencies, and to depopulate us. It will allow the food streaming that has been going on in the United States and elsewhere globally to be directed more specifically. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we know that the large food purveyors have added poisons and toxins and neurotoxins to the food supply. We know that GMOs are neurotoxins. We know that we're fighting against this, but they're getting into the food supply anyway. And what they're doing here in the United States is the centralized purveyors of the food supply are using the same packaging, but adding different toxins, if you will, and shipping it out based on zip code. So if there's an area of people that are protesters. They're going to use stealth silent weapons systems to take that area down. This is why it is important for them to gather us up into cities so that we're easily manageable. Right now, we're spread too far apart, and many of us can still survive around the fray. Of course, they don't want this. They want complete and full dominance, that full spectrum dominance. So when we talk about the Aquarius operations briefing and how this is going to impact the cities, I'm going to talk about this. The Aquarius group is a secret society, and they were tasked with mind control. And over the many years, they planned and have carried out chemical sedation of the populations, and then followed up by radio microwave frequencies for mass mind control. And what they'll tell us in this document is extremely important and very revealing. This document is only 50 pages, and I would recommend that everyone download it and understand the methodology behind the mind control. Before I forget, I want to add also that we have an extremely important document on the homepage of stopthecrime.net. It's entitled MK Ultra and Mind Control. It's only 13 pages. The last page are reference materials that you can look at. We must understand the level of manipulation, brainwashing, and mind control that we have all suffered. We have all been attacked by massive media propaganda and disinformation. We're fed it 24/7, 365. Coupled with all of the media and newsprint and all of the other aspects of propaganda, we literally are at various levels of mind control. An extremely important YouTube video that I would highly recommend everyone watch. It's called Psy War, PSYWAR. Again, PSYWAR. Type that into your YouTube channel and watch that. You will see the incremental methods in which they intentionally designed to take over our minds, and ways in which they have used the illusion of representation to control society in large. But the Aquarius operations briefing is alarming, and it should be, and everyone should pay attention to this, because what I know we're all noticing is the increased anger in society, the increased violence, the over-the-top strong arming by the police with civilians, and vice versa. And this is done by radio frequencies and the chemical sedation that we have all, at different levels, been assaulted by.
Yes, Deborah, and if people find that a little far-fetched because they haven't read the document, here's a UK government document that's available on windowsontheworld.net in the cutting edge news section. Here's a quote from it. This was a document several years ago that was issued, and here's the quote: "The impact of reductions will be one of anger, the degree of which is yet to be realised. As the reality of reduced services hit, people will rise to action. The key to big society succeeding is to galvanise this energy," which is where the facilitators come in and take over. So that's what they're saying. They're saying that they need to take control, and this is how they're going to do it. So everything we've been talking about on the show is being implemented not only in California, not only in the whole of America, but in the whole of the world. And people in Britain, and especially London, are going to see these changes ever more rapidly, as we are in the borough that I live in.
That's absolutely right, Mark. In fact, just because that sounds so fitting with what we're experiencing here in the United States, how can people get that document? I would certainly appreciate getting that and looking at that, because we'll cross-reference documents and share documents, because I think various documents are going to appeal to people in different ways. So I'll connect with you and figure out how I can get that document
Yeah,
that
it's
you just
actually on the site. I can give you the link right now for that. I've got several more which I'm going to be putting up in the next couple of days, and I've identified the hub around here, because they call it a hub. That's what these communitarians, these trained change agents, call it. And once you learn how this works, and it's not very complicated, it's very simple to learn how this works. You'll start seeing it everywhere and be able to identify it and identify the people who are doing it. These people are deeply programmed. They are very subversive, and they've been subverted. So we're not dealing with any democratic process. That's what this show's really been about, just to let people know that we live in an agenda-led world. There's an agenda which we're being forced into through what they call consensus, which has nothing to do with us agreeing with it.
That's exactly right. I wanted to read a quote, and then I'll get back to the Aquarius operations briefing.
That's
But I
great.
think this quote is so important. This was said by former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover in 1956. Quote, "The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to the realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent." I think that pretty well sums it up. And I agree with you completely, Mark. Once you understand the system, you see it everywhere. And then there's no closing your eyes to it, because it is there in every single situation. Uh, Down to going to buy your food at your grocery store. We're starting to see the mechanization now and the elimination of humans as checkout cashiers.
That's happening all over London.
Yes, that's happening everywhere. People need to be asking the next question. This is not bringing in jobs. What they must do now, and I'm straying a bit from getting back to the Aquarius, but this is exceedingly important. One of the reasons that they're introducing Wi-Fi into the school systems now is Wi-Fi, of course, is a weaponized frequency. Wi-Fi causes cell breakage and cell death. Wi-Fi is going to create, as Barry Trower tells us and other documents tell us, it's going to affect 100% of the population. And in many instances, the slow microwave cooking will have a slow onset, but that everybody will be affected. And in the instance of little girls who have their eggs, all the eggs they'll ever have for reproduction, they're going to have damaged eggs. And if they survive to marry and have children, the likelihood of a deformity is exceedingly high. We're seeing environmentally created illnesses across the board. Now we know that autism is 50% likelihood that you'll have an autistic child somewhere on the autistic spectrum. This is all environmentally created. But what I wanted to get at is this. They are restructuring the globe, and they are eliminating human jobs. So they have to eliminate large population areas through plausible deniability. In other words, the silent weapons system that is fingerprintless. The children now in school have nowhere to go because there will be very few human jobs when you've got a kindergartner now that they will ever be able to even engage in. So they've really got to reduce the population, and that is why they're forcing Wi-Fi frequencies in our classrooms now. Again, it's a way to eliminate that level of opposition. Now, I know this sounds cruel and horrific. It is. It is cruel. It is horrific. But this is the plan. We know that the plan has been to reduce the world's population. And that has been of a debate, whether it was 80% or 95%. When I spoke with Ted Turner, in fact, Anthony Hilder did a nice little film on my recounting my conversation with Ted Turner. And you can listen to that on YouTube, entitled Ted the Terrible Turner. Ted Turner, here in the United States, is the second largest private property owner in the country. Ted Turner is one of several foundations behind the Wildlands Project. Now, what you were describing a bit ago, Mark, about...
Yes, over here, Deborah, they're terming this little excursion into property and land theft with an excuse of reclaiming this marshland for the good of the planet. They call it here the Wetlands Project, but the Wildlands Project in the US means basically that half of the US will be depopulated.
Well, it's actually even more than that.
Yeah.
Because as we're starting to look at recently discovered EPA maps, we're finding that the takings of property are happening on many different levels. They're identifying greater setbacks where people will have control on their property if they have country property that has a seasonal creek or a little stream or even a river. They're broadening the distances from those waterways that you are not allowed to use if it's on your property now. And they're also attacking wells, groundwater, they're saying now in California, is being depleted at such an extent that they're in the process of creating these new regulations on groundwater well management and monitoring programs. What is really behind this is the global privatization of water. There's a big market for water, and water is the staff of life. And the globalists now are getting into water. T-Bone Pickens here in Texas was one of the first to leap into acquiring aquifers and waterways in Texas. And now the globalists are looking at the water as a market. They believe that they have not moved fast enough in the past to create a market. And what they're talking about doing is forcing the requirement of desalination plants and treatment plants. They say there's big money in bringing in chemicals and being able to reuse sludge, just as they've reused fluoride. They're saying that there is enormous profits in the water market now, and they are fashioning a global water market so that they can control the water. This is the same thing that they did with oil. This is the same thing. They have us believing that petroleum is fossil fuels. Well, excuse me, another lie that we were told in school. Petroleum does not come from dead dinosaurs. Petroleum is a renewable energy resource. We have a lot of petroleum. And we've been denied the truth. And why? Because in order to create a market, they created the disinformation and the illusion that petroleum came from fossil fuels. It does not. There's an extremely important YouTube video that everyone must watch. You can type it in. It's called The Origins of Oil. The Origins of Oil. Watch that YouTube video. There are other attachments and documents also that you can reference to when you watch that video. And you will understand how Rockefeller created the market in oil by creating the illusion that it was a finite resource. Now they're doing the same thing with water.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.